This morning in the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. This morning's gospel lesson comes from a section of Jesus' teaching that I have nicknamed Jesus, the Feisty Years. Why is Jesus so adamant here? Why is he so intense about his teaching? Well, I believe it's because he's taking seriously our Old Testament lesson and Moses' words when Moses says, I present to you life and death. Moses is talking about sin. And it is a very serious issue. I think Jesus picks up on that and recognizes why sin is so dangerous, why it is so disruptive, the threat that it makes to our lives, our relationship to others, and even to our relationship with God. And that is why Jesus takes this so seriously. Consider, if you will, a simple baseball game. It was between the Boston Bean Eaters, who would become the Boston Red Sox, and the Baltimore Orioles. It was an average game on a breezy day, May 15th, 1894. The Orioles pitcher threw a curveball a bit too close to Boston's third baseman. Maybe it was an accident, or maybe he was trying to tell that third baseman something. Whatever the case, that Boston third baseman got angry and took off after the opposing pitcher. Words were exchanged, fists started flying, the dugouts were cleared, and we had a classic baseball brawl. But it didn't stop there. Fans started coming out of the stands. They poured onto the field, and fights erupted in the outfield bleachers. Someone must have dropped a cigar that fell into a pile of oily sawdust. A small fire immediately started, but no one noticed because they were all too busy fighting. Within a few minutes, the entire stadium was ablaze, and the fire spread to the neighborhood around the stadium. Within 2 hours, the entire neighborhood had burned down. 12 acres, 200 homes and buildings, 1,900 people left homeless. Now, luckily, no one was seriously hurt or killed, but the damage was done. The vengeful fight between two angry baseball players had resulted in massive destruction. The Boston Fire. Today, Jesus wants us to know that sin can have that kind of effect on our lives, on our relationships, and on our connection to God. Notice that all of the sins that Jesus talks about in our morning gospel, all of the sins spread to community and impact our relationships with others. Those sins damage precious relationships, and they tug and unravel the basic fabric of our social networks. And really, all sins create that kind of damage. Consider, if you will, the 7 deadly sins. Okay, they're a group of challenges developed by the Christian Desert Fathers way back in the 3rd century. Biblical evils that tear apart relationships. Now, Chaucer and Dante would pick up these 7 deadly sins. The church in the Middle Ages would pick them up as well and formalize them as a teaching tool. 7 things that can hurt us individually, that can hurt our relationships, that can hurt our connection to God. I wonder how many of us could name those 7 deadly sins. Well, let me tell you what they are. Lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, anger, envy, and vanity. Those were identified by the early church fathers, the desert fathers, as the 7 deadly sins. Each of them impacts not only ourselves, but our relationships with the people around us, even our relationship with God. That's what makes their impact so far-reaching and so damaging. Now, know that the 7 deadly sins is not all that there was. Those 3rd century desert fathers also came up with the 7 godly virtues. These were things that addressed each and every one of those 7 deadly sins, the things that we could do to prevent ourselves from falling into that sin. Have any of you ever heard of the 7 godly virtues? Most haven't. Oh, sorry. What's that? 7 deadly virtues. Here are the 7 godly virtues that address each of those 7 deadly sins: fidelity, moderation, charity, diligence, patience, kindness, and humility. And in the Middle Ages, some folks added an 8th virtue, forgiveness. These are the character traits, the character qualities that build up relationships, that strengthen communities, and that bring blessing and peace to us. So Jesus gets passionate today about sin because he knows the far-reaching implications that sin can have. And the point here is that throughout his ministry, it is those relationships that he promotes. It is those relationships that matter the most to him and that he teaches us matter the most to us. Maybe more than anything else. It's not just about following rules. It's about building each other up. It's about cherishing our relationships. It's about promoting our relationship with God. Okay, one final image. For generations, the Quakers refused when our legal system asked them to witness in court and to make a vow with their hand placed upon the Bible. They would not swear. You know the line. Do you promise? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Quakers refused to do that. Quakers thought that making any kind of an oath like that was an insult to God. They based their belief on our gospel lesson today, on what Jesus taught us about saying yes to yes and no to no, and not having to make such a pledge. Now, the Quakers were criticized and they were ridiculed, and in some cases even incarcerated because of their refusal to take that oath. But over time, they gained the reputation as being honorable people. People who were always straightforward, people who would always tell the truth, people who would always say and do what was best for the community around them. Because they gained this reputation as being honest people of value and character, some courts even allowed them to testify without swearing that oath. These courts called Quakers truth tellers, and they considered their lifestyle to be a pledge and an oath that they needed to make in order to testify. Truth tellers. What about you? Would people call you a truth teller because of what you say and what you do? Someone who lives to a higher standard, to higher principles, and not just to a strict code of laws and rules? What is it that builds up your life? What is it that builds up you, your family, and the entire community around you? That's what Jesus is getting at in our gospel lesson this morning.